I'm Joey Logano, and you're watching Cup Connection.
Hey everybody, I'm Mike Massaro, and thank you for watching the debut episode of Cup Connection. Throughout the year, we'll talk with some of the sport's biggest drivers, break down the storylines, and of course, look ahead to the upcoming race. And we begin with the Daytona 500. When the green flag waves on Sunday, the 2023 season will begin, and so will the quest for the Cup Championship. Well, joining me now is the defending NASCAR Cup Series champion, Joey Logano. Joey, great to see you again. How are you?
I'm doing great. Yourself?
Terrific. You know, it's great to reconnect with you. It's been a while, but you now have 2 championship titles to your credit. What's it like going into the season as a 2-time champion?
It's no different than being a one-time champ or a no-time champ. I'm being honest, it's exactly the same. The goals are the same. And I think that's why, right? Like, it doesn't change the goals for the next season. The goal is as high as you can possibly set it all the time. That's winning a championship. You can't get any higher than that. It's not a certain amount of wins, a certain amount of top 5s or 10s or whatever. It's just winning the big trophy at the end. And whether we won last year or not, the goal this year was going to be go win the championship. So I don't feel any different at all, if I'm being honest.
All right. So I've heard you say on other broadcast platforms that the mantra for this year is never enough. And you kind of alluded to that just there in your previous answer, but
there it is.
Oh, there's the hat. You've got merch.
Oh yeah, that's for the team. We've been able to kind of get that behind on that a little bit. And mainly, a lot of that is because you hear so much in sports about a post-championship slump, right? Teams get a little content, a little happy. You know, maybe they celebrate a little too long, and they don't have the season to back up their championship. I don't want that. Don't want to have that in our mind at all. So never enough is something that as a team we're going to stay behind and try to combat that content attitude that can happen. So we're taking that one head on and pushing even harder than we did last year.
And that's why it's so difficult to continue dominating. There are few dynasties in all of sports. This sport is tough. I mean, it goes from February all the way to November. How do you keep your team performing at that extremely high level that entire time?
Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of pacing yourself, right? I mean, but you come out of the gate swinging pretty hard, right? You get the Daytona 500 that's coming up, like that race. I mean, that's a big deal to win. So we come out swinging really hard, and through the first West Coast swing, the first 5-6 races, it's always a good benchmark of where your team's at on speed, execution. Against comparing to the competition of where you really stack up, and then at that point you can kind of start working on things. But you got to kind of pace yourself a little bit throughout the season. It's so long, but the main thing is being ready for the playoffs, right? So every point's going to matter throughout the regular season. That's how we always race. Is that every point matters. But when you get to the playoffs, that's when you have to find the next gear all the time, and trying to find that's not easy, right? But you got to be able to elevate to the next level all the time.
And you got to peak at that perfect time.
Absolutely. Which we know how to do.
So let's talk about Daytona, shall we? For a bit. Obviously, it's the biggest, or I should say, the most prestigious race of the year. I mean, it pays in terms of points, just like every other race, right? But what's it like starting off the season on a high note at Daytona versus maybe not starting off on a high note?
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to fire off with a good one, right? But if I'm being honest, like I feel like the 500 has its own personality, where like you don't remember who finished the second Daytona 500. It's about winning. There's some points that yes you care about throughout the weekend, but it's really about winning. And then as you get into the other races, then that's when like a top 5 at California or Phoenix, okay, that's decent, right? That's pretty good. But like a 5th place at the 500 hurts a lot more. Where it's like, dang it, I have to wait a whole nother year before I have a chance to win in the 500 again. It means that much. It just has a different tone to it, right? When you hear Daytona 500 champion, right? Everything else is a race winner. You can be a Daytona 500 champion. It comes with the ring and everything. It's a lot different for this race where a lot of guys are willing to go for it a lot more, and they're not, to the point of being content. They're not happy or content with a 2nd or 3rd or 5th place finish.
All right, so this race, it's different than so many other races, not just the prestige, but just what it takes to win this race. As you look at it with the new car again, what are the X factors this year?
I mean, there's a lot less of them than there was last year, right? We went into the 500 last year blindfolded with this car. You had single lug wheels that, pit stops were a big question. Strategy is a big question. Restarts to drag. Just all these things that we didn't know about, right? Maybe the biggest thing that's different this year as far as a rules change on the super speedways like Daytona is the choose rule, right? Where we're able to choose which lane we want to be in on restarts. Where in the past here, it's been, only the leader can choose and everyone else is kind of odds and evens all the way back. So now we have that ability to maybe line up with your teammate if you choose to. Right, so that's going to change the game up a little bit from a strategy standpoint of how we line up in the pack. That'll change the game some.
All right, so you got a pretty good teammate. The guy won last year, talking about Austin Cindric. So Penske Racing obviously has a pretty good platform for Daytona. So as we wrap this interview up here, Joey, I want you to handicap your chances here this year to bring home another Daytona 500 win.
I feel really good about it. I honestly feel like as a race team, we're one of the top 2 or 3 best on super speedways. It shows that we're up front because we have a lot of stage points, right? So when you're able to score stage points, that means you're racing up front. You're in position a lot. Now, with all that said, when it comes down to the end of the race here, we just talked about it, how no one's happy about finishing second. That means drivers are willing to do some really risky things that don't always add up or make sense. I'm guilty of it too. But
I've seen it.
Exactly. And so your finishes may not tell the whole story to how your super speedway abilities really are, where you get caught up in some crashes. There's going to be a wreck at the end of this thing. There always is. When that intensity picks up, the bumping that's going on out there, the way these cars handle when they get bumped, their bumpers are pretty round, so if you're not centered up just right, boom, that car goes spinning. So you just don't want to be part of that.
Well, we're wishing you the best of luck on Sunday. I know you'll be giving it everything you possibly have. I know you want to come out of the gate real strong as the defending champ. So best of luck, and thanks for joining us today.
Absolutely. Good seeing you. Thank you.
Joey Logano is definitely one to watch on Sunday. He proved that Thursday night, winning his dual race. He'll roll off third. A little bit further back in the field, that's where you'll find Denny Hamlin. He starts 18th. It's tough to win from that far back, but if anyone can do it, it's Hamlin. After all, he's won the Great American Race a remarkable 3 times. Joining us now is the 3-time Daytona 500 champ, Denny Hamlin. Denny, hey, great to see you.
Thanks for having me on.
So we just talked about your stats at Daytona. 3 wins there. This is not an easy race to win by any stretch of the imagination. How have you been able to do it so many times?
I've been fortunate to have fast cars for one, but then the execution. This race is really so much about execution and making sure you don't make mistakes, especially with the next gen car where you don't, it's really hard to make it from the back to the front in a timely fashion. So all 3 facets of your game together, you got to have the skill set, you have to have execution, and you have to have luck. And they all probably are weighted about equally on percentage of what it takes, but you have to have them all happen on the same day, which is why it's so difficult.
Well, some people believe you can make your own luck if you're good enough, and obviously you've proven that you can do that. You led me right where I wanted to go with this new generation car. How's the technique different in terms of drafting and working your way to the front with this car than it was compared to the previous car?
It's way different. It's a different race for sure. I mean, it's mostly 2x2 because these cars have so much drag in them, which is essentially the horsepower to spoiler ratio, that if you pull out a line, especially like a third line, unless you have 6 cars committed to it right away, there is no line. So that's why you see mostly 2x2 racing. It's like a log jam. I essentially on the interstate, like trying to pick which lane's going to go, right? And you're just kind of according back and forth of which your line goes towards the front, towards the back. So I always just try to get the furthest car in whatever line it might be. If I can jump lines, then that's great. But I really try to just put myself in a position where I have to stay up front. I need to stay in the top 5, execute on pit road, and then I can give myself a shot at the end.
So you say 6 cars. That many need to be working together.
Yeah, a lot of it is just because of the drag of these cars. With the old cars, you could typically pull out and have just one or two guys help you, and you would have enough help that your line would start to move forward. Other cars would start to file in. But with these cars, it is very, very different. They're a little bit more symmetrical in how they, the wind goes over the top of them. So there's a lot to learn. It certainly is a different type of speedway racing than what we've had in the past.
And there's a lot of thinking that goes into it, I'm sure, as well. And I'm sure that thought process changes from green flag to white flag. So
it definitely is. And we try our best to make sure we avoid disaster whenever it typically strikes, but you just don't know when it's going to happen because everyone has to race so aggressively to stay up front with this next gen.
All right, so I just want to get in your head a little bit if I can. So let's say 5 laps to go. You're in, say, someplace in the top 10. What's your thought process there?
Well, if it's inside 10 to go, I need to be in the top 5 if I'm going to win. I just think that I have to be one of the first 3 cars, and whether it be the top line or the bottom line. If I'm not, then I need to make a hole to make sure that I am. So I need to go middle and then hope people follow me. That's kind of your only hope. So I think that you almost have to work this race backwards like a road course where, okay, when can we make it on fuel? And then from that point, just try to gain a couple spots per fuel run. And if I can do that, then I'm going to put myself in a really good position by the end of the day.
All right. I want to change subjects a little bit. We all watched the dual races on Thursday night. It appeared to me that the Fords are extremely strong this year. What's it going to take to beat them?
Well, I think that it always looks that way in the duels because they always have the most numbers. Simply stated, the duels is typically a strategy type race where the manufacturer with the most numbers typically always looks super strong there because everyone's committed to each other during the dual race because no one wants to tear up their car. Everyone's just happy pushing the line. But the Daytona 500, everyone is way more selfish. If you're the 8th Ford in line on the bottom, you are stuck and you are not going anywhere unless you make an attempt to pass. So I think that, Thursday, while you kind of got a good indication of some fast cars, maybe, I don't know that really that tells the whole story of what we're going to see on Sunday.
I think you're right. We always learn more on Sunday. It seems like everybody may have a little bit more for that race. You start pretty deep in the field. Can you get to the front with what you've got?
I can certainly, like I said, I think I have to be patient though. I think I'm going to, starting was about 18th or so. I think I'm going to have to just gain 4 spots per fuel run, like just really be patient with this. And so, I think the key also is going to be avoiding the wrecks that typically happen at the end of stages. I typically I bail on that. I try to get out of those packs, but it's just with the racing being so different, I don't know that I can afford to lay back and wait till the end of the race. So I'm torn on what strategy I'm going to play out. I just need to talk to my team more and find out more analytics of what we really feel like that, gives us the best chance and the best odds to win.
And of course, it's always great to be able to talk to your team. And one guy you've always been able to talk to in the past who was part of your team, you know where I'm going with this, was always Kyle. Kyle was in your meetings. He could offer some advice to people like yourself and vice versa. You give it to him as well. But now you have to beat Kyle. Does that change things for you? I mean, he's an awfully tough competitor.
Yeah, he is certainly. And he's with a manufacturer that's got more numbers. So I certainly think he's going to be, a tough guy to beat. His results haven't always been that great on super speedways, but I know that his skill set is plenty good enough to do it. So, he'll be tough to beat. I mean, if I had my list of probably top 6 or 7 guys that I think that have the strong enough skill set to do it, he's on that short list.
Yeah, that is a short list. You're on that list too, by the way. So I want to get into historical perspective. We'll just wrap up the interview with this last question. 3 Daytona 500 championships, or wins, I should say. There's only 2 drivers in history who have won this race more than you. And I know you know who they are. Richard Petty, Cale Yarborough. If you win one more, you tie Cale. A little ways to go to reach Richard. But what does it mean to be in that conversation?
It means so much because it's just a different game now. And I believe that it's tougher now than ever has been. When those guys were winning and dominating, they were probably racing each other and maybe a couple other cars on the lead lap. And, it's just so different now with these cars, that how tight they are in a formation. We've got 36 cars out there probably that can go out there and win on Sunday. It just, like I said, it takes so many things to have to go right for you to win them. So if I can win 4 in this era, I never would have dreamed I would have had 3, but to have 4 would be, I'm as motivated for this one as any.
You got room in your living room for another car?
I can make room.
All right. Well, best of luck, and thank you again for joining us.
All right. Thank you.
When the green flag waves on Sunday in Daytona, it will officially begin NASCAR's 75th anniversary season. And there are so many storylines. Let's begin with handicapping the field, which honestly feels impossible after last year. There were a record time 19 different winners, and no reason to believe that will change this year. There's also a healthy crop of young talent with rookies Ty Gibbs and Noah Gragson. They themselves could get to victory lane. And what about familiar faces in new places? Kyle Busch is now with Richard Childress Racing after a lengthy stint with JGR. It'll be interesting to see if he can debut with RCR by winning a race he's never won before, that of course being the Daytona 500. It is perhaps the only trophy in his trophy case that's missing. And we can't forget about Jimmy Johnson. The 7-time champ is coming back for a handful of races, which begins with the Great American Race on Sunday. And the series says goodbye to a surefire Hall of Famer. Kevin Harvick will make his farewell at the end of the season as he retires from Cup racing. We'll cover all of those storylines and more here on Cup Connection.
Thanks for watching. Feel free to check out our other videos, and don't forget to smack that subscribe button down below while you're at it. Also, for more great and original content, head right over to bvmsports.com.